The cruelest thing about losing everything is that sometimes it happens in a single night. Naomi Carter stood on the front porch of the house she had called home for 14 years, staring at two suitcases sitting beside the welcome mat. The porch light glowed behind the glass door, but it no longer belonged to her. Inside, Ethan Brooks moved through the living room without looking back. Not once. Not after 14 years of marriage. Not after the sacrifices. Not after the promises. The rain had started only minutes earlier, a cold spring rain that darkened the sidewalk and soaked the sleeves of Naomi's coat. She wrapped her arms around herself and watched the silhouette of the man she once loved disappear deeper into the house. Then the lights upstairs turned off. One by one. Like someone closing chapters in a book. She looked down at her phone. No messages. No missed calls. No one asking if she was okay. Her bank app buzzed with a notification. Account access restricted. Naomi frowned and refreshed the screen. The same message appeared. A second notification followed almost immediately. Her credit card had been deactivated. She swallowed hard. Ethan handled most of their finances. She had trusted him. Now even that trust had vanished. For a moment, the street felt impossibly quiet. No traffic. No voices. Used rain tapping against the pavement. She picked up her suitcases and walked away from the house. Away from the neighborhood. Away from the life she thought would last forever. 2 hours later, she checked into the cheapest roadside motel she could find just off Interstate 75. The room smelled faintly of old coffee and cleaning supplies. A flickering lamp cast weak yellow light across faded wallpaper. Naomi sat on the edge of the bed and opened her suitcase. She wasn't looking for anything specific. Used something familiar. Something that reminded her who she was before everything fell apart. At the very bottom, beneath sweaters and old photographs, her fingers brushed against a small envelope she hadn't seen in years. The paper was worn. The edges softened with age. Her grandmother's handwriting covered the front. Naomi froze. Slowly, she opened it. Inside was a silver card unlike any bank card she had ever seen. No logo. No account number. Used a single engraved name. Carter. Naomi stared at it as thunder rumbled outside the motel window. Then she remembered the last words her grandmother had whispered years ago: if the day ever comes when you lose everything, use this. Naomi tightened her grip on the strange silver card. And for the first time that night, she wondered who her grandmother really was. So many memories do not return all at once. They arrive in pieces, like old photographs drifting to the surface after years beneath dark water. Naomi sat awake long after midnight, the silver card resting on the motel nightstand beside the envelope. Outside, headlights swept across the curtains every few minutes as trucks rolled down the interstate. Sleep never came. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her grandmother's face. Evelyn Carter had never looked wealthy. She lived in a modest brick house outside Savannah, Georgia. She drove the same old sedan for nearly 20 years. She clipped coupons from newspapers and spent Saturday mornings tending roses in her front yard. Growing up, Naomi had believed her grandmother was the most ordinary woman in the world. Yet now, staring at the strange silver card, that belief felt less certain. Shortly before sunrise, she unfolded the letter again. The paper carried the faint scent of cedar and age. Most of the message was simple. Words of encouragement. Advice about resilience. Reminders to trust herself. But one sentence stood out more than the rest. When the time comes, do not be afraid of what you discover. Naomi read it 3 times. She could not remember noticing those words years ago. Maybe she had. Maybe they simply carried a different meaning now. The morning light slowly filled the room. She checked her bank account again. Still restricted. Her savings were almost gone. The motel room had cost more than she wanted to spend. The reality of her situation settled heavily on her shoulders. For the first time in her life, she truly had no safety net. No husband. No home. No clear plan. Used the mysterious card and a letter from a woman who seemed to know this day would eventually come. Around 8 o'clock, Naomi packed her belongings and checked out. The motel clerk wished her a good day. She smiled politely, though uncertainty followed her every step. 20 minutes later, she parked outside a downtown branch of Sterling National Bank. The silver card remained inside her coat pocket. She had considered leaving it behind. She had considered throwing it away. Yet something about her grandmother's final words would not let her. The bank occupied a marble building nearly 80 years old. Business professionals moved in and out through revolving glass doors. Naomi hesitated on the sidewalk. For a moment, she felt foolish. What if the card meant nothing? What if she was chasing a fantasy because she had run out of options? She reached into her pocket and touched the cool metal surface. Then she remembered Evelyn's calm voice. If the day ever comes when you lose everything, use this. Naomi took a slow breath and walked inside. She had no idea that within the next few minutes, an ordinary banking transaction would trigger a chain of events that had been waiting more than a decade to unfold. The difference between an ordinary object and a priceless one is often a secret that only a few people understand. Naomi stepped through the revolving doors and entered the grand lobby of Sterling National Bank. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, reflecting across polished marble floors. Business executives crossed the lobby carrying leather briefcases. Bealt seemed to move naturally through the building, invisible but present in every detail. Naomi felt out of place. Her coat still carried traces of rain from the previous night. Her suitcases sat in the trunk of her car. She had spent the morning wondering whether she was making a mistake. Yet somehow she found herself standing in line, waiting her turn. When the teller called her forward, Naomi offered a polite smile. The young woman behind the counter smiled back. How may I help you today? Naomi hesitated before reaching into her pocket. The silver card felt colder than she remembered. I am not exactly sure what this is, she admitted. My grandmother left it to me years ago. The teller accepted the card and glanced at it casually. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her expression changed. The smile disappeared. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she turned the card over. Naomi noticed the teller's fingers tighten around the metal edge. One moment, please. The woman typed something into her computer. A second later, she stopped. Completely stopped. Naomi could see the color drain from her face. The teller looked at the screen. Then at the card. Then back at the screen. Is something wrong? Naomi asked. The teller did not answer immediately. Instead, she picked up the phone beneath the counter and quietly spoke to someone Naomi could not hear. Less than 30 seconds later, a man in a dark suit appeared from a nearby office. He introduced himself as the branch manager. His attention never left the silver card. "Ms. Carter?" he asked carefully. Naomi blinked. Yes. The manager's posture straightened immediately. It was subtle, but unmistakable. Suddenly he seemed less like a manager helping a customer and more like someone greeting an important guest. "Would you mind waiting a few moments?" he asked. "There appears to be information we need to verify." Naomi agreed, though confusion continued to grow. She moved to a nearby chair. Through the glass walls of several offices, she noticed employees speaking urgently. One manager entered a conference room. Another left carrying a tablet. Two more appeared moments later. None of them looked relaxed. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Naomi checked her phone. Still no access to her accounts. No messages. No answers. Across the room, the branch manager received a call. Whatever he heard caused him to stand immediately. He nodded several times before ending the conversation. Then he looked directly toward Naomi. For the first time, she noticed genuine nervousness in his expression. He walked across the lobby and stopped beside her chair. Miss Carter, he said quietly, someone from our executive office would like to speak with you. Naomi frowned. Executive office? The manager nodded. Yes, ma'am. He swallowed carefully before adding the next sentence. The request came directly from headquarters. Naomi stared at him, completely bewildered. She had entered the bank expecting nothing. Yet somehow a simple silver card had reached people far above a local branch manager. And as she followed him toward a private office, one question echoed louder than all the others. What exactly had her grandmother left behind? Power is rarely announced. Most of the time, it reveals itself through the way other people react. Naomi followed the branch manager through a set of frosted glass doors and into a private office overlooking the city. The room was larger than she expected, furnished with dark wood shelves, framed financial awards, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of downtown Savannah. Yet what caught her attention was not the office itself. It was the behavior of everyone around her. The moment she entered, an assistant stood and offered her bottled water. Another employee arrived carrying a tray with coffee and pastries. A third person asked if the room temperature was comfortable enough. Naomi had walked into the bank as an ordinary customer. Somehow, in less than an hour, she was being treated like someone important. The branch manager remained standing while she sat down. He checked his watch repeatedly. Every few minutes his phone vibrated with new messages. Time, he responded immediately. Naomi noticed the tension in his posture. It was not fear exactly. It was the kind of careful attention people give when they know a mistake could have serious consequences. Can someone please tell me what is happening? Naomi finally asked. The manager offered an apologetic smile. I wish I could, Miss Carter. Unfortunately, I do not have all the answers myself. That response only deepened the mystery. Outside the office, activity continued to increase. Through the glass walls, Naomi could see employees moving quickly between departments. Two individuals wearing executive badges arrived from another floor. A woman carrying legal documents entered a nearby conference room. At one point, Naomi even spotted a security supervisor speaking quietly with senior management. Yet no one appeared alarmed. They appeared focused. Organized. Prepared. As though a long-awaited event had suddenly begun unfolding. 20 minutes later, the office door opened. A distinguished man in a navy suit stepped inside. Gray hair. Impeccable posture. Expensive watch. The branch manager immediately greeted him with visible respect. Regional Director Matthews, he said. Naomi blinked. ¿A regional director? Why would someone that senior be involved? The director shook her hand warmly. Miss Carter, thank you for your patience. Naomi studied his expression. He seemed relieved to see her. Not curious. Not surprised. Relieved. Do you know what this card is? She asked, removing the silver card from her purse. The director looked at it for only a second before carefully sliding it back toward her. The card belongs with you, he said. That much I can tell you. Naomi waited for more. None came. Instead, his phone rang. The instant he saw the caller identification, his entire expression changed. He answered immediately. Yes, sir. The room fell silent. The branch manager stopped moving. Even the assistant standing near the door became still. For nearly a minute, the director listened without speaking. Then he nodded. Understood. We will prepare everything. He ended the call and slowly turned toward Naomi. For the first time all morning, someone finally gave her a real answer. Miss Carter, he said carefully, the person who wishes to speak with you is not from the executive office. Naomi felt her pulse quicken. Then who is it? The director took a measured breath. The request came directly from the chief executive officer of Sterling National Bank. The room seemed to grow quieter. Naomi stared at him in disbelief. She had never met a bank chief executive in her life. Yet somehow one of the most powerful people in the institution now wanted to speak with her personally. And judging by the expressions around the room, everyone already knew something she did not. Sometimes the most important answer is not the one you receive. It is the one that gets delayed. Naomi sat quietly inside the private office while employees moved through the hallway beyond the glass walls. The atmosphere had shifted again. The moment the regional director revealed that the chief executive officer wanted to speak with her, the entire branch seemed to become even more attentive. Yet no one explained why. A few minutes later, the office phone rang. Every person in the room looked toward it. The regional director answered immediately. His voice became formal. Respectful. He listened for several moments before covering the receiver and turning toward Naomi. The chief executive officer is ready to speak with you now. Naomi felt her heartbeat quicken. She had never spoken to the head of any major company before, much less one of the largest financial institutions in the country. The director carefully transferred the call and handed her the receiver. Take your time. Naomi accepted it cautiously. Hello? There was a brief pause. Then a calm, mature voice answered. Ms. Naomi Carter. It was not a question. The man already knew exactly who she was. Yes. Another pause followed. Not uncomfortable. Almost soulful. Then the voice spoke again. I have been hoping this call would happen for a very long time. Naomi frowned. The statement made no sense. I am sorry, but I think there must be some mistake. No mistake, the man replied gently. In fact, this may be the most important call I make this year. Naomi glanced toward the others in the room. They pretended not to listen, but she could see their attention fixed on every word. I do not understand, she admitted. The voice softened further. That is completely understandable. There are things you have not been told. Things that should have been explained many years ago. Naomi gripped the receiver tighter. Her grandmother's letter flashed through her mind. The silver card. The strange reactions. None of it felt real. Can you please tell me what is happening, she asked. The man remained silent for several seconds. When he finally spoke, his answer created even more questions. Before I explain anything, there is something you deserve to know. Naomi waited. For the last 11 years, Sterling National Bank has been searching for a member of the Carter family. The room seemed to disappear around her. Searching, she repeated. Yes. Why? Another pause. Because certain responsibilities cannot be transferred until the rightful person is found. Naomi stared through the office window toward the city skyline. The words felt impossible. She had spent the previous night wondering how she would pay for a motel room. Now one of the most powerful banking executives in America was speaking as though she were connected to something far larger than money. My grandmother never mentioned any of this, Naomi whispered. That does not surprise me, the man replied. Evelyn Carter was known for protecting people she loved. Hearing her grandmother's name from a stranger sent a chill through Naomi. The chief executive officer knew who Evelyn was. Not only knew her. He spoke of her with respect. Almost admiration. There is much we need to discuss, he continued. But not over the phone. Naomi felt 1,000 questions crowd her mind at once. Then when? The answer came immediately. As soon as possible. Then his tone changed slightly. More personal. More sincere. Ms. Carter, after 11 years, we finally found you. And what comes next will change everything you thought you knew about your family. The truth rarely arrives all at once. It reveals itself one piece at a time, forcing you to question everything you once believed. After the call ended, Naomi remained seated in silence. The receiver was no longer in her hand, yet the chief executive officer's words continued echoing in her mind. 11 years. Searching. Rightful person. Responsibilities. None that sounded connected to the grandmother she remembered. Regional Director Matthews offered her a moment before speaking. There are documents we would like you to review, Ms. Carter. Naomi looked up. Documents about my grandmother? Matthews nodded. About your family. A few minutes later, a leather folder was placed on the conference table. Naomi opened it carefully. Inside were photographs, historical records, and articles dating back decades. The first image showed a group of men and women standing in front of a newly completed bank building. The black and white photograph appeared nearly a century old. Naomi barely glanced at the building. Here. Attention locked onto a familiar last name printed beneath the image. Carter. Her stomach tightened. She turned the page. Another photograph. Another reference to the Carter family. Then another. And another. Every document seemed connected to the same name. This cannot be right, she whispered. Matthews folded his hands. It is. Naomi continued reading. Decades earlier, before Sterling National Bank became a national institution, several founding families had provided the capital that kept it alive during difficult years. The Carter family had been one of them. Not employees. Not customers. Founders. Naomi shook her head slowly. Her grandmother had spent mornings gardening and afternoons volunteering at local schools. She had baked pies for church fundraisers and spent holidays teaching children old family recipes. Nothing about Evelyn Carter suggested a connection to banking history. Yet the records in front of her painted a very different picture. Why would she hide this? Naomi asked quietly. Matthews looked toward the window. Some people value privacy more than recognition. Naomi remembered all the times she had asked her grandmother about family history. The older woman always smiled and changed the subject. Back then, Naomi thought she was protecting old memories. Now she wondered if Evelyn had been protecting something far larger. As she continued turning pages, another realization emerged. There were fewer Carter names appearing in the records over time. Entire branches of the family disappeared from later documents. Some relocated. Others passed away. Eventually, only one line remained. One direct line. Naomi's. Her pulse quickened. Are you telling me I am the last one? Matthews did not answer immediately. The silence itself felt like an answer. Across the table, another executive entered carrying additional files. The room suddenly felt more serious. More important. Naomi had walked into the bank searching for help. Instead, she was uncovering an inheritance of history she never knew existed. Yet one question still remained unanswered. What exactly is the silver card, she asked. Matthews exchanged a glance with the other executive. Tene. Spoke carefully. That card is not a banking product. Naomi stared at him. Then what is it? His voice dropped slightly. It is proof. Naomi frowned. Proof of what? Matthews met her eyes. Proof that the final Carter heir has finally been found. And for the second time that day, Naomi felt her entire understanding of her life begin to shift beneath her feet. The people who underestimate you rarely notice when the world begins treating you differently. 2 days after Naomi walked into Sterling National Bank, the first signs began appearing outside the bank's walls. She had been moved into a quiet executive suite at a historic hotel overlooking the Savannah River. The arrangement had been made by the bank, though no one referred to it as a gift. Every employee simply called it a temporary accommodation. Naomi still found the phrase strange. Nothing about the situation felt temporary anymore. Each morning, new documents arrived. Family records. Legal historias. Corporate archives. The deeper she looked, the more impossible her grandmother's secret became. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan Brooks was enjoying what he believed was a fresh start. He told friends the divorce had been inevitable. He assured colleagues that Naomi would eventually figure things out. After all, she had always depended on stability. At least that was the story he repeated to himself. Then the first unusual thing happened. One of Ethan's co-workers stopped by his office holding a business publication. "Have you seen this?" the man asked. Ethan glanced at the article. A photograph showed Sterling National Bank's headquarters preparing for an upcoming private shareholder event. Nothing seemed remarkable until he noticed a familiar last name in the article. Carter. Ethan frowned. Carter was not an uncommon name. He dismissed the thought and returned to work. But the coincidences continued. Later that afternoon, he spotted a black luxury sedan parked outside the hotel where Naomi had supposedly been staying. The vehicle carried discreet executive credentials on the windshield. The following day, another colleague mentioned hearing rumors about a previously unknown heir connected to one of the bank's founding families. Ethan laughed it off. Yet the name appeared again. Carter. By the end of the week, curiosity had become discomfort. He opened social media and searched Naomi's profile. There were no updates. No complaints. No emotional posts. No requests for help. Nothing. The silence unsettled him more than any argument could have. Naomi had always faced hardship with quiet determination. Yet this silence felt different. Deliberate. Meanwhile, Naomi sat inside a private conference room reviewing another collection of historical records. Regional Director Matthews pointed toward a family chart spread across the table. Every branch eventually narrowed toward a single name. Heirs. There is one final review taking place, Matthews explained. Once completed, the board will formally acknowledge the succession. Naomi still struggled to understand how her life had transformed so quickly. Less than a week earlier, she had worried about paying for a motel room. Now lawyers, historians, and executives discussed her future as though it carried institutional significance. "What happens after that?" she asked. Matthew smiled carefully. "After that, the entire organization will know what the silver card represents." Naomi looked down at the card resting beside the documents. For years it had been nothing more than an old family keepsake. Now it seemed to open doors everywhere it appeared. Outside the conference room window, the afternoon sun reflected across the river. Naomi watched the light shimmer on the water and thought of her grandmother. Evelyn had known this day would come. Somehow, she had prepared for it long before anyone else. And far across the city, without fully understanding why, Ethan Brooks was beginning to realize that the woman he thought had lost everything might be standing at the beginning of something far greater than either of them had ever imagined. Some inherit money. Others inherit influence. But the rarest inheritance of all is authority. The following week, Naomi entered Sterling National Bank headquarters for the first time. The building towered above the city skyline, its glass exterior reflecting the bright Georgia afternoon sun. Yet what struck her most was not the architecture. It was the reception. The moment she stepped through the entrance, conversation seemed to pause. Executives greeted her by name. Assistants escorted her through secured elevators. Senior managers stood when she entered conference rooms. No one treated her like a guest anymore. They treated her like someone who belonged there. Naomi still struggled to accept it. Part of her remained the woman who had sat alone in a roadside motel only days earlier. But another part was beginning to realize that her grandmother had spent years preparing her for a truth she had never been allowed to see. That afternoon, she was escorted into a private boardroom overlooking the Savannah River. Floor-to-ceiling windows surrounded the space. A long polished table stretched through the center of the room. Seated around it were attorneys, board members, financial historians, and senior executives. At the far end sat the chief executive officer himself. Jonathan Sterling rose as Naomi entered. Every other person in the room followed his example. The gesture caught her completely off guard. Jonathan smiled warmly. Welcome, Ms. Carter. Naomi took her seat, still uncertain why everyone regarded her with such respect. A thick folder rested in front of her. Jonathan opened it carefully. For years, he began, many people assumed the Carter family's significance ended with their financial contributions. It paused. That assumption was incorrect. Naomi listened carefully. Around the room, every face remained focused. Jonathan continued. The Carter family did not simply help create this institution. They helped design the structure that governs it. Naomi frowned slightly. What does that mean? Jonathan exchanged a glance with the legal counsel before answering. It means your family's role was never limited to ownership. He slid a document across the table. Naomi read the heading twice before fully understanding it. Founding Governance Charter. Here has moved lore. Certain powers outlined in the charter could only be exercised through designated family succession. Powers that had remained dormant for years because no verified heir had been identified. Naomi looked up slowly. The room remained silent. Jonathan finally spoke the words no one had been willing to say directly. The silver card was never connected to money. Naomi stared at him. Then what is it connected to? Jonathan's expression softened. Authority. The word seemed to settle over the room. Not wealth. Not assets. Authority. Naomi suddenly understood why the bank had reacted the way it did. Why executives became nervous. Why managers stood when she entered. The card represented something far more significant than a financial account. It represented legitimacy. Recognition. A living connection to the institution's origins. Jonathan leaned forward slightly. When your grandmother passed away, certain rights remained inactive. We could not move forward until the final heir was located. Naomi lowered her eyes to the silver card resting beside her documents. For years it had traveled unnoticed in a drawer. Hidden. Forgotten. Yet now she understood its true purpose. It was never meant to unlock an account. It was meant to identify a successor. And as the realization settled over her, another thought emerged. Somewhere outside this room, people still believed Naomi Carter had lost everything. None of them knew she had just discovered something far more powerful than money. The strongest victories are often the quietest ones. 3 weeks later, the formal succession announcement took place inside Sterling National Bank headquarters. Senior executives, board members, legal representatives, and invited guests filled the room. News of the event had already begun circulating through financial circles. Most attendees expected a routine corporate announcement. Very few understood the significance of what they were about to witness. Naomi stood near the windows overlooking the river, dressed with the same simple elegance her grandmother had always admired. She wore no expression of triumph. No need to prove anything. Across the room, Jonathan Sterling stepped to the podium and addressed the gathering. He spoke about history. Legacy. Responsibility. Then he introduced the final verified heir of the Carter family. Naomi. The room rose in a standing ovation. Not because of wealth. Not because of influence. But because everyone present understood what her name represented. For a brief moment, Naomi closed her eyes. She wished her grandmother could have seen it. Later that afternoon, as the event concluded, her assistant informed her that someone was waiting downstairs. Naomi already knew who it would be. Ethan Brooks stood in the lobby. He looked older than she remembered. Not because of time, but because certainty had left him. The confidence that once filled every room around him seemed quieter now. When their eyes met, neither spoke immediately. Ethan finally broke the silence. I did not know. Naomi nodded politely. I know. He looked down for a moment before speaking again. If I had known. Naomi stopped him gently with a small shake of her head. The answer did not matter anymore. If he had known, he would have treated her differently. And that realization said everything. Not because she had changed, but because his perception of her had. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Ethan glanced toward the silver card resting inside the folder she carried. "All this came from that card?" Naomi followed his gaze. A faint smile appeared on her face. "No." Ethan looked confused. Naomi carefully closed the folder. "The card did not create any of this." She looked toward the sunlight reflecting across the river outside the glass walls. "It only revealed what was already there." Ethan had no response. Naomi wished him well. Nothing more. No anger. No revenge. No dramatic farewell. She simply turned and walked away. As the doors opened ahead of her, warm afternoon light filled the corridor. Somewhere in the past, a frightened woman had sat alone in a motel room believing she had lost everything. But she had not lost everything. She had only lost what was never meant to stay. What remained was something no one could take from her. Her name. Her legacy. Her dignity. And as Naomi stepped forward into her new life, she finally understood the gift her grandmother had left behind. It was never about money. It was about knowing who you are when the world forgets.